So you're photographing your first wedding and you are freaking out. You are going into panic mode. Well, I'm here to tell you, if you follow my 5 tips for surviving your first wedding, you will do just that. My name is Pedro Pereyra and I'm a professional photographer. I specialize in wedding, event, and lifestyle photography. Without further ado, here's my first tip: exposure. Making sure your photos are properly exposed is the #1 thing. A photograph that's way too underexposed, when you work with it a little bit in post-production, you can bump it up a little bit, but once you start to get to having to correct it way too much, you will start to get digital noise and grain. Likewise, if a photo is just way too bright, you will lose some details and some information on the photo, and that is just not acceptable to give to a client. My #2 tip is focus. Making sure you don't have blurry photos will keep you in the game. Blurry photographs are just unacceptable to give to a client. Make sure you know how to adjust the correct shutter speed to match what you are photographing. For instance, a first dance requires you to have a faster shutter speed so that you can kind of freeze the motion, freeze the movement. As well as you can work in a lower shutter speed if you're working with the getting ready or objects that are not moving. If you don't know much about shutter speed, watch a tutorial on YouTube. I'm sure there's 1 billion tutorials on shutter speed. Very important. #3 is backup equipment. Now I know what you're thinking. I barely have a camera. I don't have any backup equipment. Well, you're not alone. I was you not too long ago. I went to do my first wedding. I didn't have a backup camera, but I did bring a backup lens, and I also brought backup batteries, backup memory cards. So that's what I mean by backup equipment. Backup whatever you have, whatever is possible. Batteries, SD cards these days are a must. You must keep at least 3-4 memory cards, 32 gigs, 64 gigs. Memory cards are just not that expensive anymore, so there's not a reason why you shouldn't have a few of them. Which leads us to tip #4, which is take lots of photos. Look, you're bound to make mistakes. It's your first event. Of course, you're gonna do things that you're gonna have to get rid of and throw away some photos. So making sure that you have enough photos will allow you to look through everything and make sure that you pick out the best photos for your client. Even today, as a professional photographer, I make sure when I'm at events, I take plenty of photos and I know my exposures properly. I know my photos are not blurry. My photos are composed right and they have the right posing, but I still take a lot of photos because there will still be photos here and there that will be underexposed or overexposed, or here and there will be a blurry photo or somebody coming out chewing gum or something that you didn't see. So make sure you have plenty of photos so that you can pick through the best photos. And our #5 tip for surviving your first wedding is make sure that you take raw images. When I first did my first wedding, I didn't know anything about raw images, so all my images were in JPEG. Luckily, I had good enough composition, good enough lighting that I squeezed through the day without making a mistake that would have cost me my career. But basically, JPEG images have already been compressed, have already been added contrast and sharpness by your camera, versus a raw image. It's just a file with a lot more information, where in post-production you can correct a lot of your mistakes. And as your first event, or as any photographer, even professional photographers, we need software to be able to correct our mistakes, and raw images will allow us to just do that. If you don't follow the first 4 tips, then it just doesn't matter in post-production. You could only correct so much. So you want to make sure that you follow these 5 tips, and I guarantee you, you will survive your first wedding as a wedding photographer. I wish you best wishes and best of luck.